Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyeh b'dvarai.
Amen.
Okay, good morning to everybody. Very special day. Yat Kislev, as Hashem, the gates of the illumination of Pnimius Torah and Chassidus should open for all of us this year to be a year full of depth, a year full of light. Be'ezras Hashem. Today's shir is sponsored by Eli Walbram of 92nd Nach.com. Also sponsored by R Yaakov Klein, nishmas, his parents, Brent Street, Simcha, and Ya'Yakov and Yeshayihu. Also sponsored anonymously zechus for Klal Yisrael singles. Also dedicated as zechus for refuah sheleimah for Chaim Yehoshua ben Chaim Miriam. Also sponsored Hatzlacha for Akiva Lev ben Michal Davida umishpachte for Hatzlacha b'chol inyanim, and nishmas Hadassah Hinda bas for Mordechai Meir be'ezras Hashem. The learning should be a zechus for all of the names and families mentioned above. B'soich all of Klal Yisrael be'ezras Hashem. So we jump back in to our limud be'ezras Hashem, starting a brand new Torah today. Excuse me, Torah Lamed Dalet, and here we begin a spate of almost identically sized Torahs. We're gonna have four medium-sized Torahs now: Lamed Dalet, Lamed Hey, Lamed Vav, and Lamed Zayin. After which Lamed Ches is quite lengthy. And then we move into short, quite short Torahs, which last for a bit, and we continue journeying be'ezras Hashem. So Torah Lamed Dalet is on the pasuk V'atem tiyu li mamleches kohanim v'goy kadosh Eila advarim asher tedaber el bnei Yisrael. There's some controversy as to when Torah Lamed Dalet was said, because it's brought in Chaim Moharan that when Reb Aaron, who was the Rav of Breslov and one of the early Hasidim of Rabbi Nachman, came close to him, the major themes that Rabbi Nachman discussed with him were the themes that appear to be Likutei Moharan Torah Lamed Dalet. But the problem is, we know that Rabbi Nachman did not want any of the Torah that he revealed prior to Eretz Yisrael to be included in the printing of Likutei Moharan. And that was way before Eretz Yisrael. That was really in the beginning, way before Ibn Nassan. That was really in the beginning. And so some resolve it by saying that it's known that Rabbi Nachman would have kept sort of notes and basic ideas that may show up in later Torahs post Eretz Yisrael, and he was talking over some of the themes that would eventually be incorporated into Torah Lamed Dalet when that Torah was revealed later on. But generally speaking, it's assumed that Torah Lamed Dalet is post Eretz Yisrael. And Reb Levi Yitzchak Bender said that Torah Lamed Dalet was considered by the Breslover Hasidim to be one of the core foundational teachings of Rabbi Nachman's path, and they would review it almost constantly, or at least very consistently. Okay, so it's a Torah that we should pay special heed to. It's a very deep Torah. It's a very beautiful, beautiful Torah, and it's a privilege to embark on this journey. What treasures we have! Can you imagine? What treasures! Unbelievable. So here we go. Hashem says to Klal Yisrael prior to Matan Torah, as a hakdama to what Klal Yisrael are about to become, in the receiving of the Torah, you shall be for me a kingdom of kohanim, of priests, v'goy kadosh, and a people of holiness, a holy people, a transcendent people. These are the words, says Hashem to Moshe Rabbeinu, that you should communicate to Klal Yisrael. Ksiv, says the Heilige Rebbe, it's written in Tehillim, Cherpa shavra libi. My heart has been shattered by shame, by cherpa, by embarrassment. Says the Rebbe, Hainu acharafus bizayonos shayvrim libo shel adam. Cherpa and bizayon break a person's heart. Now, generally, brokenheartedness is a really good thing. We speak about Shivron Lev, the Kotzker Rebbe, there's nothing as whole as a broken heart. We spoke last night again from the Derga Machan Ephraim, a good heart is a broken heart. And that's generally true. There's a tremendous chasm between atzvus and Lev Nishbar, atzvus being a very terrible thing because it means a person's given up hope. Lev Nishbar being a very positive thing because generally it means that a person knows where they are and they're full of cheshek, they're full of yearning. And we learned last night, for those who weren't able to make it, from the Maggid of Mizrich, whose yard site is today, at the end of Parshas Kisisa, that it will be as a result of the cheshek of Klal Yisrael, not as a result of their great maisim gedolim, but as a result of their yearning to perform maisim gedolim despite their rootedness and stuckness in gashmias and in darkness, that Mashiach will arrive. Right? Says the pasuk, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says it's as a result of the cheshek that they express. Yismach leiv mevakshei Hashem is kibesimcha seitzeu. That's the joy with which we will leave. Galus is the joy of Yismach leiv mevakshei Hashem. So that's a very good kind of simcha. That's a very good, rather, kind of shivron leiv. That's a result of cheshek. That's a result of yearning. But we're going to see in context that over here, when we speak about the shivron leiv, we're speaking about a heart that's broken as a result of harafus of bizayon that come upon a person when a person is not using their God-given capacity to connect to Hashem for the right reason, and instead is using their capacity for connectivity with lowly things, with gashmias, with ego, and not with the infinite, and not with others, ben adam l'chaveri, and the ultimate other, which has been adam l'makom. So the cherpa and bizayon, that's shayuvrim liba shaladim. That's the cherpa, that's the bizayon, like Rabbi Nachman said, commenting on what we say in the Hiratzen after the Birchas HaShachar in the morning, part of the Birchas HaShachar, at the very end, we say, v'lo lidei nisayon, v'lo lidei bizayon. And the Rebbe said in Yiddish, other anisayon, other bizayon. Right? Meaning, lo lidei nisayon is prior to the Avera. Because we know that if we're not oimid in nisayon, it ends up in a bizayon. And we're asking Hashem, don't bring me lidei nisayon, and if you bring me lidei nisayon, don't bring me lidei bizayon, because it's other anisayon or other bizayon. Because the bizayon is, that's where it's at. When a person finds themselves stuck in lowly things, that leads to shame, that leads to a broken heart. Shayvin liba shalada. Tikkun, what's the tikkun? What's the rectification? In enigmatic lashon, and it's very precise because it's lashon Rabbeinu Zichron Livracha. It's the wording, the exact wording of Rabbi Nachman. Tikkun, the rectification, who is when a person binds his heart to the Nekudah that is shaykh to that person's leiv be'es hazois at this particular moment in time. This is a doorway out of the darkness. This is a foothold. The capacity for a person to begin the journey out is by identifying a nekudah hashayach leliba le'es hazais. That particularized point that becomes relevant for that person at this specific moment in this specific situation. If you remember, we discussed yesterday the relative framework in Torah Lamed Gimel between Abba Yamim and Abba Das, which isn't absolute, but rather is like an overlapping spectrum, so that every notch along in the direction of Abba Das is already the light of Abba Das, and every step backward, although it might still be l'cha'ira under the influence of Abba Yamim, of Abba Das, is still falling back into Abba Yamim, because it's all a relative system of makif and pnim nasa and nishma, like we learned. And the way that we presented it there is that the next step up, the next movement in the direction of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is relevant or even possible for that particular person, meaning given their experience of what they've integrated in relation to their pnim, there is a makif. That makif, like we said yesterday, is called Ava Shabadas. It's absolute. And in as much as they could then be mikasher their mind to their heart, and to bring down, right, that inyan of the awareness and the consciousness, and then to integrate it and to bring that makif pinim. So then there's zechus to Ava Shabadas. That's the inyan of why they say why at least most Hasidim didn't wear ties, right? Because the Hasidim didn't want to interrupt between the head and the heart. So the Hasidim didn't want to wear a tie, because a tie is wearing around the neck and it cuts off. Right, so instead they wear gartel, to cut the lower part of the body off from the upper parts of the body. They didn't want to wear a necktie.
It's not doing the gartel head.
Yeah, so they didn't want to. They wanted to cut off the lower part of the body, There was a pretty prominent Chabad Chassid who wore ties. So they wanted to, they didn't want to get involved between the heart and the head, right? The Ikar Nekudah of Chassidus is this, right? Is to take what we know and to try to bring it down, That's the Ikar Nekudah. It's possible to suggest, again, because we're reading the Torah as flowing forth one, from the next, one into the other. But this is what the Rebbe is referring to. And that's the lave. That's that person's makif. That's that person's avashabadas. That's that person's nekudah. But somebody else, either who's below that madrega doesn't even know about that makif yet, or somebody's already far integrated that makif. It's b'chlal not relevant for them because they're way past that. That's not relevant for any. It doesn't matter, because for this particular person in the aspect of b'shvili nivra olam, like we said yesterday, this is the nekudah shaykh l'liba be'ez hazais. And that's all a person ever needs. And this is a question a person has to ask themselves all the time. What am I doing now? What am I doing now? Right? What's the inyan of my avoida in this circumstance? What's the nekudah shaykh l'libi be'ez hazais? We said over last night, look, Yat Kislev, we spoke about the famous story in some depth. If you're able to get the recording, I think there's value there, Be'ezus Hashem, because we revisited a lot of the common themes that I framed it in what I think is a unique way, the siyata d'shmaya. But there's a story there, the famous story about the interrogator who asked the Baal Tanya the question of what it means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to ask Adam and Chava and Gan Eden and Ayekah, where are you? How can it be that God who knows everything, who is everything, right, who created the garden and knows every leaf and what's behind it, needs to ask Adam and Chava, where are you? And the Baal Tanya famously answered that the call of Ayekah wasn't just a call to Adam and Chava, was a call to every person. And it's not asking where are you physically, it's asking where are you in relation to your mission? Where have you gone? Why aren't we fulfilling what we were sent to this world to fulfill? Ayekah. And that call Ayekah in this context is very, very precise, because it's not asking about where is the oilam. It's not like where's everyone else. It's asking Ayekah, where are you? What's the nekudah shaykh l'libi be'ez hazais? What's my avoida in this circumstance? What's the next makif that I could integrate? Says the Rebbe, when a person does that, that's your doorway out. You don't try to take on too much. You say, what am I working on now? Right? What's my avoida today? What's my avoida right now in this moment? Because there is no moment, because of our ayin va'asad adayin, the past is gone. The future hasn't arrived yet. What's there is what's here in the moment. I saw that quoted from it's a song. I mean, MBD, I think, has a song, Ha'avar ayin va'asad adayin, v'ha'eve ke'aref ayin, and therefore daga binayin, right? And it finishes daga binayin. So why should a person worry? The past is gone, the future hasn't arrived. Ha'eve ke'aref ayin, the present will pass in no time. So where are you worrying? I saw that same quote quoted in the Peliyaitz, actually, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. The Peliyaitz doesn't end with daga minayin. I don't know why. I guess it's just a common phrase. He puts the words in kum shesei yayin. Get up and drink wine. Like, there's no past, there's no future. The present is gone. It's like you may as well drink. But it was the same idea. It's just a little bit of a different version. I can't imagine MBD having incorporated that. So daga minayin, right? There's no inyan of what was, what will be right now. Nekudah shaykh l'liba be'ez hazos. Okay, so what does this all mean? Says the Rebbe zechus yagan leinu and his beis. Ki hine haklal. Here's the general principle. Shahamimshala bi'arat tzaddikim lifel pu'ulos k'ritzaynai. A person needs to believe as part of emunas Yisrael, emunas chachamim, v'yaminu b'Hashem u'b'maisha avdai, that the tzaddik has a mateh. Like the Svarim HaKadoshim say, the mateh of Moshe Rabbeinu, the staff, wasn't just an actual mateh that he had. Mateh is milashon lahatois. It means he can move things around. He can cause things to happen. That's what the mateh was. Obviously, everything is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like we've learned so many times. Hashem just tells Moshe to pretend to put up the Mishkan. Hashem is putting up the Mishkan. But ultimately, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in some bechina, gives over Memshala to the Tzaddik Lifel Pa'ulais K'Ritzaynai, to be able to bring about in the world what the Tzaddik's Ratzon is. Like the Gemara says, in Meir Katan Tezayin Abed Beis, Tzaddik Moishal. Mi Moishal be Tzaddik. Tzaddik Moishal B'Yiras Elikim, the pasuk says that it says that Tzaddik rules, that Tzaddik is Moishal. Mi Moishal be. Chazal learned the word Moishal to be referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu experiencing sovereignty. Who could be sovereign over HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Mi Moishal be, and the answer is Tzaddik Moishal. V'zeu b'chinas v'Yosef hu hashalit. Yosef was the ruler. Who mashbir l'chol am haaretz, right? The pasuk continues. Moshe Rabbeinu supplied all of the nations of the land with grain. And Imnasan writes in Likutei Halachos that the ikar memshala of the tzaddik is to make gerim and bali tshuva. That's the ikar memshala of the tzaddik. That's what he writes. The ikar power that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives over into Klal Yisrael's hands is that the tzaddik has this capacity to help people change. And that was given over into the tzaddik's hand, which is paradoxical because we've said many times now from the Dagamach Ephraim that the pasuk Yimincha Pshuta L'Kabel Shavim, Hashem's right hand is outstretched to receive the penitent sinners, is actually a reference to the tzaddikim. So the tzaddikim are given memshala into their hand, but they are Hashem's hand. And that's exactly what we just said about Moshe Rabbeinu putting up the Mishkan, but it's Hashem putting up the Mishkan. But it's in the form of the tzaddikim. They have that memshala. And so it's so beautiful that he quotes the pasuk, V'Yosef hu hashalit, not just to let you know that Yosef, of course, is the midah of bris, right? Yosef, of course, is the tzaddik, Yisoid Olam. Yosef is Yisoid tzaddik. But the pasuk continues, Hu amashbir l'chol am haaretz, and the Berditchever Rav understands the word Hu amashbir to mean not simply that Yosef supplies food, shever, right? Milashon shever, that there's grain sustenance to all of am haaretz, but he learns it to mean milashon l'shaber, to shatter, to break. And l'chol am haaretz doesn't mean the people of the land. It means amaratzim, people who are on a lower level. He breaks them out of their prison. So you see over there a remez to what Reb Nosson says in Likutei Halachos that the primary sovereignty of the tzaddik is to help those who are on a lowly level. Yosef hu hashalit, hu amashbir l'chol am haaretz. He's able to break the chains of all of those who are stuck in their ignorance as a result of their ignorance, and to help them out. V'hu shirish klalius nishmas Yisrael. And the tzaddik is the shirish klalius, nishmas Yisrael is the collective root of all the souls of the Jewish nation. V'heima anafim shalai, and the rest of the Jewish nation are branches off of this tzaddik, hamakablim imanu. And this was already written by the Baal Tanya, right in the beginning of Tanya, where the Baal Tanya says that all of Klal Yisrael is like one body, and the tzaddikim are the roish. And so all the other parts of the body are connected to the Rosh. Rabbi Nachman says Rebbe is Rosh Tevis, Rosh B'nai Yisrael. That's what a Rebbe is, right? Rosh B'nai Yisrael is the head of all of Klal Yisrael. But then the Rebbe says, although there are tzaddikim harbe, yesh nekudah se'emes shebeina tzaddikim, there's a nekudah of truth within and among the tzaddikim that all the other tzaddikim are anafim off of this ikar nekudah. Hu shirish klalius nishmas Yisrael. Abachina va'ata alis al kulana. Everything else is flowing forth from that primary nekudah sa'emes. The ikra memshala, Reb Nachman says it. The ikra memshala is laha'ir ulis libam la'avodas Hashem yisbarach. That's the ikra memshala of the tzaddik, is to awaken and to inspire the hearts of all of those branches that branch off of the tzaddik. That means that if Rabbi Nachman is a tzaddik emes, that means that a person could go 120 years and not identify at all, not have learned anything or anything like that from Breslov, but it means that they're already connected to him because they're already branches on a soul level off of the tzaddik. even if on a this worldly level they haven't been privileged enough to recognize that and to fortify that and to open up those potential pipelines so that they're infused with the wisdom and infused with the chiyas and the energy. Anybody was there last night, that's what there was. Where else do you find that? Dancing like that, joy like that, feeling like that, like this endless infinite dance that just went on forever and ever and ever. That, Yiddishkeit, just pure unbridled Yiddishkeit. We want every Yid to feel that. We want every Yid that experience. And not for any reason. Not because we finished a Masechta or accomplished something. For no reason. Just because we're so happy that there was a tzaddik in the world called the Baal Tanya. And we're so happy that he was able to be released, from Tsar and Matzaik. And that he was able to fill the world with the light of the Tanya and all of his teachings. Like, just to celebrate Yiddishkeit. To celebrate the light of the Geula. We want every Yid to feel that. Every Yid could feel that. Every Yid should feel that. Every Yid is a branch off of the root of that energy. Shema Hashem kol Yehuda ve'el amei tevienu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu listens to the voice of Yehuda ve'el amei tevienu, and is able thereby, at least in the way of the Remez reading of the Pasuk, to bring Hashem to all of Am Yisrael. As a result of Shema Hashem Kol Yehuda, because the Memshala of the Tzaddik, who in this case is Yehuda, is L'hayir U'Le'Yisayir Libam La'avodas Hashem Yisbarach, is to awaken and to inspire Klal Yisrael to return to Hashem. That's the Ikar Memshala. And Hashem is forced, so to speak, to comply. Hashem wants that he should be ruled over. Mi Moishal be Tzaddik Moishal. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is kiviyachol forced to comply with the ratzon and almost the demand of the tzaddik, that the light of the tzaddik should be mispashit down into the anafim, into the branches. Hainu believe Yisrael, into the heart of each and every Jew. V'zehu ve'el amai tevienu. This that HaKadosh Baruch was listening to Kol Yehuda is Ve'el Amai Tevienu, is the desire of Yehuda, the tzaddik, to bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu down into the anafim. It's just an oddity. What's interesting in this context is that you just a minute ago used, in order to support the idea that the tzaddik is Moishel, Yosef HaTzaddik, Yosef Hu HaShalit. And then over here he's using Yehuda. Yehuda is not usually the tzaddik. Yehuda is the Baal Tshuva. Yehuda is the Inin of Malchus, right? That's not, generally speaking, it's a strange pasuk to bring. But the Mefarshim explain that in this context, when there's a yichud between Malchus and Yisod, which is the Bechina Vayigash, we're going to learn in a few weeks, excuse me, Vayigash Elav Yehuda, and that in all the Svarim HaKadoshim is a yichud Malchus and Yisod, because Yehuda is approaching Yosef. Yosef is Yisod Tzaddik, the Inin of Bris, and Yehuda is the Inin of Malchus Nukva. So when they're brought together, then they're unified in such a way where one is within the other, right? There's an intermingling between Yisod and Malchus, and that intermingling brings out the tzidkus that should exist in every experience of Malchus, and the Malchus that exists within every experience of tzidkus, because the tzaddik is Moishel. And so the Rebbe is bringing both aspects of that to show you Yosef, who Ashalit, is the Bechina Malchus in Yisod. Shema Hashem Kol Yehuda is the aspect of Tzidkus in Malchus, right? It's the Lichud Yisod in Malchus, which Beklalius, which we're going to learn, is the connectivity between all of Klal Yisrael, who are Nukva, who are the Mekablim, with the Yisod, which is the aspect of the Tzaddik. Right? And so the Rebbe is bringing both aspects of this Yichud, Yisod, and Malchus, the aspect of the Yichud Tzaddik, which is the Shirish, and Klal Yisrael, which is the Anafim, and together it's one unit. And this aspect of the way in which the tzaddik is Moshe B'Yer Silikim, and therefore the tzaddik has tremendous power, so that Shema Hashem Kol Yehuda Ve'el Amei Tevienu, because all the tzaddik wants is that every single member of Klal Yisrael should be illuminated and activated with the spirit that he knows he could deliver to them if they would only listen. Hayayim imikoyle tishma'u. They could really be redeemed. Mamish hayayim. If only we would listen. If only we would listen. Says the Rebbe, Ubechina Hazois, this aspect, Hainu be Yosef, who Hashalit, Yosef is the ruler, who Bechinas Malafum, is the aspect of the Nekudah called Malafum. We more commonly refer to this as a shuruk, right? But Malafum is also one of the ways to refer to this Nekudah, which is unique among the Nekudas because it's not just a Nekudah, it's not just a vowel, or like they call it here, I think, at least in my child's school in Noam, they call it a helper. Do they do that in other schools? Yeah, it's so beautiful. It's a helper. It helps, which in the context, if you want to go very deeply into it, in Lamed Aleph, where the Nekudas, where the neshama to the guf, Gavalt, the neshama is helping the guf. That's all the neshama wants to do. It's a Nekudah. Unique among the Nekudas is the Shuruk Malafim in that it is a letter and then a Nekudah. It's the letter Vav with a dot in the middle that pronounces that creates the sound U. Says the Rebbe, this Nekudah that we're learning right now, Mamish, this Nekudah Hashayach L'liba Be'ez Hazais, this Nekudah of the Tzaddik is called Malafim. My high, what does he mean? Because the Zohar HaKodesh tells us that bris, we know, is a merkava le'yisoid. Bris, which is the inyan of the tzaddik, particularly Yosef tzaddik, we're reading about in this week's parsha, Eishes Potifar. This is it, right? Yosef becomes the tzaddik because tzaddik yisoid olam, and Yosef is overcoming this nekudah of pagama bris. Bris is a chariot for yisod. And we know that all the 10 spheres have a Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei in them, because you can't have anything that doesn't have a Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. Specifically, of course, the spheres, which is the root of everything, it's all Yud Kei Vav Keis. But the distinction between the Yud Kei Vav Keis on that primordial level, deep within the essence of the spheres as they emerge from the Echad Yachad and Miyuchad, the distinction between them is that each one is a Yud Kei Vav Kei with a different set of Nekudas. And so the Yud Kei Vav Kei of the Midah of Chesed, for example, is with a Segel. You have this in your book, the Nekudas? Second edition, right? The Segel is with Yud Kei Vav Kei in Chesed. The Shva is with Yud Kei Vav Kei in Gevura. The Chirik is in Yud Kei Vav Kei of Netzach, right? The different spheres have different Nekudas in them. The Sphera of Yisod with its Yud Kei Vav Kei is with this Nekudah of the Malachim. Asher havaya shaloi b'nikud malafim. So what you end up having is yud with then a vav and a nekudah in the middle, and then hey and then a vav and then a nekudah in the middle, and then vav with another vav and a nekudah, and then hey with a vav and a nekudah. It's malafims all the way through. That's the yud ke vav ke correlated with the midah of Yisod ki amalafim. So what's the depth of that malafim? Who are isiyos malafim? Why is it called a malafim? What a strange word. What's malafim? Right? It's not a Hebrew word. Mazeh. Says the Rebbe, it's a conjugation between two words. Malay fum. What's a fum? Is Aramaic for mouth. Puma is a mouth. And malafum is a mouth that's full. Lahayrais, what this communicates is sheklei hashefa. Hainu apeh shalat tzadik. The peh in this context represents the inyan of expressivity, the inyan of shefa. The way in which the tzaddik is able to reveal to the world the depth of his teaching, the depth of his consciousness. The mouth is the klei adibur, the klei hashefa. Hu malei met likusei shel Hashem yisbarach, is saturated with godliness. Because what is godliness? Godliness is efficacy. It's able to make things happen. It is what is happening, right? God doesn't make things. God is happening. Everything that happens is God. The Ginas Agos points out that all of the times in the creation narrative that it says the word Yehi, Rekia, Yehi Ar, well, not in that order, Yehi Ar, Yehi Rekia, Yehi, right? He says Yehi is just Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, channeled into this form. It's not, Yehi means we are now taking a portion, Kiviyachal, of the R Ein Sof, It's becoming Yehi Rakia, right? It's channeling energy from the ultimate Nimsa, right? The only being that really exists. I really want to give Shirim and Ginas Agos one day. Pastor Hashem Neder. It's remarkable. I mean, it's one of the most remarkable Svarim I've ever seen. And almost nobody learns it. So much so that the Chavrusa that I'm learning with it with Matzah Shabbos, was told that he purchased the last printed copy in Eretz Yisrael. They couldn't find any other copies. This was the last copy. They don't print it anymore, and this was the last copy they had in stock. It's a huge chaval. It's a phenomenal sefer. Rabbi Yosef Kektila Rishon, the Baal Shari Oira, one of the very, very well-known introductory svarim to Kabbalah, also highly encouraged. But Ginas Egos, right? This is what he writes over there. It's he are. And so Elokusi Yisbarach is memshala, is the ability for things to change, for things to develop, to evolve, to flourish, to blossom. So that Tzaddik, who is Yosef, who is Shalit, who is Mashber l'chol Amaretz, is the inin of Mulafum. His fum is Malay. It's full. What's it full of? It's full of Elikus. Shechina medaberes b'soich groinoi shel Moshe. It's the same idea. Moshe is talking. Hashem is talking. Moshe is talking. The tzaddikim are given the ability to be poil in this world. How? Because they are the yamin of Hashem. Shalish pa'amim bashana, like we said prior. Yirah kol zechurcha es b'nei adar Hashem. What's es? La rabbis, Rabbi Shem Ayekah. That's Pnei Adan Hashem, Da Rashbi. Male fum, who male me'eli kushal Hashem Yisbarach. So says the Rebbe, Kilachar Kasha, Lachayr, it's a question, Lama, Anu Tzrichim L'Tfila. Why do we need to daven? Hashem Yisbarach Yedeh Machshavos. HaKodesh Baruch Hu knows everything we need. Why do we have to speak out our dibur? We should just think it. Right here he's asking a slightly different question than Chaim as to why we need to daven if Hashem knows what we need. Over here he's saying, why do we have to daven with our words? Kiviyachol, HaKodesh Baruch Hu can't read our minds. He needs to hear the words like another human. Why can't we think it? Avol, so says the Rebbe, Machmas, the reason is Dibur Klei HaShefa. Dibur is Klei HaShefa. Shebehem Mekablim HaShefa. When we speak out the words, we are actually malifum. We are filling our klei hadibor with shefa from within, and that, because our body is mechuven keneged ha'olam ha'salyanim, actually triggers and causes the flow of shefa, which is the bechina of kol kutzricha kol Ya'akov, to then itself kiviyachol begin to channel into the klei hadibor, where it's ready for release into the Olam HaGashmi. And so our own expression of our machshava into dibur begins to trigger and catalyze the process of shefa in the upper realms coming down into the klei dibur, klape, the needs that we're davening for. So these two systems are aligned. Says the Rebbe, the dibur is the kli for the delivery, as it were, of the shefa, and that's where the shefa of the kol becomes defined, specified, articulated, expressed, capable of being understood, heard, experienced. So shebehem mekablim hashefa. So this too triggers the shefa mile'ela that a person's davening for to come down, if it's aligned with the ratzon Hashem, the ultimate ratzon, to come down into the klei HaShefa. I have blessed you like I have spoken to you. Bracha is associated with dibur. Because dibur is the experience of taking shefa mile'ela, which in the case of a person actually articulating is the aspect either of machshava, which is hidden away, or kol, which is still on the physical plane, is still unspecified and undefined, and then articulating it, bringing it down into the klei hashefa. Vayivarich eschem kasher dibur lechem. Hainu lefi hadibur kein hashefa. Im hadibur hainu haklei hashefa hu b'shleimus u'malaya. If the tzaddik's klei hadibur is b'shleimus u'malaya, And as a result of his tzidkus, as a result of him embodying the midah of Yesod, the inyan of Tzaddik Yesod Olam, so then all of the channels are opened up, and he serves as the unifier between Kodesh Baruch and Shchinte. He serves as Tzaddik Man Da'achid B'Shmaya Ba'ara, who is able to unify the upper realms and the lower realms, who's able to be the Mashber L'chol Am Haaretz, right, to take those who are stuck in Gashmias and to give them a ti'ima, a tam, a taste of our Abba Shabbadas as a result of his teachings and the path that he's laying out. So then, as Ayekah on the Kabul Behem, Rav HaShefa. So then the Klei HaDibur are complete. It's a bechina of Malay Fum, which is the Nekudah in Yud Kei Vav Kei that's associated with the midah of Yesod, which is the ultimate Kli of Shefa, right? That's the transference of the Shefa, Mile'ela, Milibuna D'Maicha, traveling down the spine, right? And then ultimately release. The Dibur of the Tzaddik is b'shleimus. You could find everything in it. That's why it works. That's why it works. You can sort of judge, not that we're judging, but you can sense as an indicator of the greatness of a tzaddik in terms of how pile the words are. Are they impactful? Do they change people? Do they transform people? Not just spiritually entertain people, like we said in a previous year. Do they work? Right? Do they work? Do they help people grow? Do they help people change? Do they help people make better decisions? Do they help people elevate their value system and start thinking differently, spending their time differently, worrying about things differently, feeling happy over different things, feeling sad over different things, right? Is it transformative? In accordance with the sheleimah of the Klei HaShefa, or the Klei HaDibur of the tzaddik, that's how effective the tzaddik's attempt at being mashbir l'chol am haaretz ve'al amay tevienu will be. That's why the tzaddik will be able to draw shefa down to Klal Yisrael. That's why the tzaddik is called Malay Fum. Because there's always shefa coming down from that root to all the branches. Each person with what they need. People who are in a time of shayv, what do they need? Baki b'shayv. They need to know v'atziyah sha'al yineka. People who are in a time of ratzai, what do they need? Baki b'ratzai. Im esak shamayim, still sham'ata. In other words, every person has a nekudah hashayach lelibai le'es hazais. He has the avodah that's relevant for them now. The tzaddik being the shayrish from which all the anafim are mispashit. In our case, with this very particular tzaddik, Rabbi Nachman said that his inyan is encoded in the words nachal novea mikar chachma, because after the Rebbe revealed that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is hinted to in the inyan of ki lo shakach mi pizare, this is the very first Torah, pre-Torah aleph that we learned, l'chu chazu, where it's revealed that Rabbi Shimon is hinted to in the pasuk of ki lo shakach mi pizare, because zarai is a reference to the zera of, the progeny, the children of, and who is that word referring to? Says Rabbi Nachman, look at the Sofei Tevis, the closing letters of Ki, Loi, Sishakach, Mi, Pi, Zaroi, and it spells Yochai. And so there's a reference to Rabbi Shimon, who's the Zera of Yochai, that ultimately Rabbi Shimon used that very pasuk as a raya that Ki, Loi, Sishakach, Mi, Pi, Zaroi, that the Torah would not be forgotten from Klal Yisrael, that Hayos, the Luchas have been broken, and once the Luchas were broken, that brought Shikha into the world, there's a place for Pnimius where the Luchas were never broken. And that's Pnimius HaTorah. That's the Torah Datika Stima. And Rabbi Shimon himself said the Rebbe is rooted in the pasuk Ir v'kadosh min Shemaya nachis, and that's Rosh Tevis Shimon, a heavenly angel, came down into our world. And then Rabbi Nachman said V'achshav, and now yesh nachal novea mikar chachma, which was a clear reference that Rabbi Nachman considered himself either a gilgul of or a direct hamshacha of the continuation of the revelation of Rabbi Shimon's light. The achshav, and in this era, we have this iteration, this incarnation of nachal novea mikar chachma, and these words are incredibly precise. What's mikar chachma? Which sphere is Makar Chachma? What's the Makar of the sphere of Chachma? The Makar of Chachma is Keser. You guys have to have this mamish. You have to go and review. You have to mamish review. Of course, the Makar of Chachma, that wasn't a complicated one. It is Keser. Now, Keser is the Makar of Chachma because Chachma me'ayin timatzeh. Chachma emerges from the realm of instinct. What's Nachal? I'll play easy on you. Nachal is more difficult. Nachal is always a reference to Bina. That's called Nachal. Nachal is Bina. Ma'ayan, as we're actually going to see in a minute, and that's why I'm giving this small introduction. Ma'ayan is Chachma. It's called the source. Reish is Chachma. It's the spring as it emerges. The Nachal, which is the hispashtus of Chachma, is the Nekudah of Bina. Nachal novea mikar Chachma means the ability to find the unity of Keser, which is Makar Chachma, as it manifests in Chachma, which is explicitly referenced in that pasuk, and manifests within the world of Bina, which is, like we've learned, the world of brokenness, the world of shattering, the world of duality, multiplicity, the world of small, where things begin to unravel. And this is the revelation of this is the revelation of Rabbi Nachman, is to find the R of Keser, which we were spending so much time talking about in Torah Lamed Gimel, the Tefillin Shel Rosh, Tat Fas, within Bina Daika. In Breslov, this is taken as a given. Rabbi Nachman is taken a Bina. Rabbi Nachman is taken a Bina through the R of Keser. And some other Chassidus, there's what I believe is a somewhat artificial distinction between Chabad and Chagas. Rabbi Nachman is neither. He's Keser Elyon. He's Mala Mata, not from right to left. He's the Inyan of V'yitnu L'cha Keser Melucha. And that's why the Rebbe says in one place the Iker is the Ratzon, Keser, and in another place he says the Iker is the Maisa, Malchus. He has both. He is both. The ultimate Ratzon and the ultimate Shaiv. The ultimate root from which all other branches emerge. The Nekudah Sa'emes Shebein Tzaddikim, which is Keser, out of which Chachma emerges. That's the Inyan of the early expressivity of the Nekudah of Ratzai, right? Those who are connecting to Hashem, the Tzad Yamin, and also Bina, which is the Nekudah of those that are nispashed off to the Tzad Small, which is Shaiv, those who are sinking into Yerida. And furtherance from the unity of godliness, out of the Reishis Chachma, out of the Asa Likimas Ha'adam Yashar, Hashem creating the human being Yashar, and then Bina is Vehema Bikshu Cheshbonis Rabim, and they're splintering off into that world of Bina, into that world of separateness, into that world of Din. And from this tzaddik comes the teaching about the Nekudah Shayach Laliba Be'ez Hazais, where every person needs to be able to identify what is the particular Nekudah that I need right now. And the reason that's able to happen is because the tzaddik is Makar Chachma, is Keser. And from Keser comes all of the branches, the branches that ultimately will spread even further down into Chesed and Gvura, and then further down into Netzach and Hod, and further down ultimately into Yisai. It all emerges from that singular Nekudah where Yediah and Bechira are one, where Ratzei and Shoiv are one, where Nigla and Nistar are one, where Tzaddik and Lamdin are one, where Bris Ilah and Bris Tata are one, where Yadayim and Raglayim, going back to Torah Yud, are one, and all of the other elements. I have in mind to make a chart of all the pairs of the dichotomous pairs of dialectics throughout the whole Likutei Moharan, because that's what the whole thing is. Both. Synthesis. Why? Because every aspect of duality traces itself back to Chachma and Bina, and Rabbi Nachman is Keser. It's that Karev Yoim Mashu Lo Yoim V'Lo Laila, which you can't quite get at because there's a mighty barrier preventing you from really being able to get it. But by bumping up against it every morning here with Likutei Moharan and trying to la'at, that consciousness begins to descend. That's Keser Elyon. That's Nachal Novea Mekar Chachma. Memela, that Tzaddik's able to draw down to the branches of Klal Yisrael that extend out of the Shirish, everything that each individual needs, which is going to be different from what the other individual needs, in the side of Nekudah Shayach Lelibai Be'ez Hazois. But ultimately, like I've said many times, I think also in the past, the ultimate goal of the tzaddik is not that we should focus on the tzaddik and venerate tzaddikim. The ikar of the tzaddik is to show each and every one of us that we have a tzaddik inside. In Breslov, there isn't just like Rabbi Nachman's the tzaddik. Rabbi Nachman the tzaddik wants to teach you about the tzaddik you have. Every one of us has inside of ourselves this Nekudah of tzaddik. Also of Beinini, also of Russia, but also of tzaddik. There's a Nekudah of tzaddik. So says the Rebbe in some of the most beautiful words in the Sefer, I think. Every single yid has an Indian in them, which is called tzaddik moishel. Which is in their own life an aspect of Maloifum, that part of themselves which knows what to say, that part of themselves which is pouring forth wisdom and insight. There's a tzaddik inside. Sometimes it's not about listening to others. It's about really taking time and Hisbodedus to be makshiv to your own life. You'd be shocked. Maybe you wouldn't be. I'm sure you wouldn't be because you probably all have had this experience. What kind of gems you can come up with during Hisbodedus. You're like, who is even talking? Like, where is this coming from? All of a sudden you talk through an Indian with Hashem. It's the best therapy session in the world. All of a sudden and it's not because someone else gave you advice. You start to come up with the clarity of like, oh my gosh, I never realized that before. That's the inner tzaddik talking. The inner tzaddik is the inner Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is talking. Hashem's talking. It's not Moshe Rabbeinu. Shechina medaberes b'soich groinai. What form does it take? It takes the form of the tzaddik. Says Rabbi Nachman in Torah Kuf Nun Vav. We're going to get to it. All the diburim that we speak in Hisbodedus is b'chin of Ruach HaKodesh. That's what the Rebbe says. And he brings the pasuk lecha Amar Libi, Gesundheit. Lecha Amar Libi, Rashi says, Lecha b'shlichuscha Amar Libi. When my heart speaks, it's b'shlichus from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because it's the inner tzaddik, which is the Nekudah of Moshe Rabbeinu, who's Shechina b'daberes b'soich groinai shel Moshe. It's an amazing, that means you and me in this room have a Moses and me, I think there's a song like that, have a tzaddik inside of us. We have the Moshe Rabbeinu inside that's speaking mamish words of emes, but it has to be words of emes, not manipulative. It means in a moment of real authenticity, and everybody knows what that is. There's a kol d'mamadaka. There's a maloi fum. There's a part of you that is not at a loss for words. There's a part of you that knows exactly what to say. There's a part of you, like I said yesterday, people always asking, what's the practical eitzah? You don't need me to tell you what the practical eitzah. You know the practical eitzah. Yeah, everybody knows what they need to work on. Now work on that. You don't need anything new or fancy. Even though I want to clarify what I said yesterday, of course Rabbi Nachman has practical eitzahs. I didn't mean to say that all it is encouragement to keep Shulchan Aruch. Of course, that Tzaddik brings down to the world so many Tikkun HaKlali, and there's so many practical things in Breslov. I'm not going to come out from every single line in Likutei Moharan per se, but there's so many practical pieces of wisdom. I guess what sort of was frustrating me a little bit is that people are so quick to ask someone else when come on, like everybody knows what to do. Everybody really knows what to do. Everybody knows what they need to do. Everybody understands, and really more than that, not just does everybody understands in a way that nobody else could really understand what the Nekudah is, the Hashayach Leliba Be'ez Hazois. You know what that is. You have inside of yourself a Maloifum, a part of you that is not at a loss for words, a part of you that's full. Like the pasuk says about Amech Kulam Tzadikim. Klal Yisrael is tzaddikim. V'zeu perish Yisrael mam shaloisav. And in this aspect, all of Klal Yisrael is the Indian of mam shaloisav. Who did we say is the Moishel? Me Moishel be, tzaddik Moishel be. But now that we're explaining that ba'amech kulam tzaddikim, that every member of Klal Yisrael has that part of themselves that's a tzaddik, memela Yisrael mam shaloisav. There's a way in which, like we say, lamnatseach mizmar, the Gemara in Psachim, Zamru l'misha minatzchen asay v'sameach. Hashem is klape each and every member of Klal Yisrael happy when we conquer him. In other words, when we kiviyachol force Hashem to allow us to become Bali Tshuva. Kol ma sha'amar b'al habayis aseh, chutz mitzeh. You can force HaKadosh Baruch Hu kiviyachol. That's Rabbi Nachman saying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you already said ben kach ben kach banayim. You can push me away all you like. I'm not going anywhere. You must listen to me. This is the Bechina of Esther Amalka. Mamash in Purim already. It's unbelievable. Right? This Indian of Esther who says, Achein avay el hamelech asher lo kedas. Illegally. It doesn't matter. It says in Shulchan Aruch, there's no hope for me. Shuvu banim shavavim chutz mi, and put your, fill in your name here. Doesn't matter. Kol sha'amar ba'al habayis aseh chutz mitzeh. You do not have to leave. You can force that hand. Says Reb Tzaddik, a lot of what I just said actually is from Reb Tzaddik, but it says Reb Tzaddik in two places, Divrei Chalemis, as well as in Ikvesah Tzaddik, and in Divrei Chalemis, he says that he received this min Hashemayim as a dream on a Friday night. That the Gemara says, Chutzpah Malchus b'lo taga. Chutzpah is Malchus without a crown. Because what kind of chutzpah is that? A person takes memshala if nobody wants them to be Maishal. That's called a dictator. That's not Malchus. That's chutzpah. That's a person who's leading without the willingness of the people. That's not a leader. That's a dictator. Yeah. Says Reb Tzaddik B'Pnimi is what's Malchusa is the sphere of Malchus. What's Taga, crown? Is Keser. What's Keser? Is the Ratzon Hashem. Chutzpah, therefore, in a certain sense in that definition, is when a Jew has a Malchus, they want to, and it doesn't appear to be aligned with Ratzon Hashem. That's Chutzpah. Says Reb Tzaddik HaKohen, the Gemara says that at the end of time, Chutzpah Yaski. Al Pi Pshat, it means there will be a lot of Chutzpah in the world. But Reb Tzaddik says the word Yaski doesn't just mean the chutzpah will increase, but the word yaski comes from the Aramaic word sagi, which means it will be enough. It will be efficient. Says Reb Tzaddik, at the end of time, we will not be ra'ui, and it will appear to be the Ratzon Hashem to push us away. Our desire to come close will not seem to be aligned with Ratzon Hashem. It will be a Malchus b'lo taga. Chutzpah. It's Malchus b'lo taga. The Balabai said, say, go away. It'll work. If we hold on tight and we demand from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, kiviyachol, with our maloifum, that part of ourselves that knows what we need, that part of ourselves that knows what we want, that part of ourselves that refuses to give up, that says, I'm not going anywhere. I don't have to listen if the Baal Bayis throws me away. I'm not budging. That's the Maloifum. That means Yisrael mam shaloisav hainu mimoi shall be tzaddik. Ki yesh b'chol echad mi Yisrael davar yakar. Every member of Klal Yisrael has a davar yakar, precious thing, shebechinas nekudah, which is a special nekudah toiva. That special point, masha'ein b'chaverei, that no one else in Klal Yisrael has. Every person has a davar yakar. K'maisa da Abaye v'Abba Umna, the Gemara in Tainis, Abaye was frustrated that he wasn't receiving a welcome from Shemaim every day, and Abba Umna did. And he said, why is this? And they answered him, you can't possibly do what Abba Umna does. Abba Umna was a bloodletter. Abba Umna had all these different devices where he would try to go ahead and do things in the most serious way. He would put men in the one waiting room, women in one waiting room. He had this special thing that would enable him only to let blood from one place and not to see the rest of the body. So Abaye, you're not shaykh to Abba Umna's Nekudah. You're not, what are you going to become a bloodletter now and do things b'tznius? That's not your Indian. And in this aspect which each member of Klal Yisrael has, in a way that no other member of Klal Yisrael has, he's able to be mashpia to and illuminate and awaken the heart of his friend. There's an nekudah that every person needs to be mekabel from someone else. Like it says about the malachim, they need to be mekabel from the other. Sounds mighty similar to podcasting, right? Where again, and I've mentioned this in the past, it's not an inyan of mashpia mekabel. It's called sichas chaverim. It's when people sit together with respect for one another, realizing I have a nekudah. That's ma she'ein b'chaverai, and every other yid you sit with has a nekudah she'ein b'chaverai. And to be humbled by that. To be humbled by that. I was just, there's one more minute, really, we're over time. I'll just say one tiny thing. I had occasion to sit with, so I don't want to give away too many details. I had occasion to sit recently with a young man in the community, a young bacher. And he was talking to me about, he's involved in a certain chesed organization, describing to me what they do and how much time he spends and how devoted he is. And I left the conversation mamish humbled. Mamish humbled. Now on the surface, he's coming to speak to me because I'm some rabbi and I have what, you know something? The conversation was over and I said to myself, he's the Rebbe. He's the Tzaddik. You have nothing to teach him. I mean, I have what to teach him, but I have in other words, I felt mamish be'emes, that I have so much more to learn from him than he has to learn from me. He has a nekudah masha'in b'chavere. I don't have that in you. And he has that nekudah. I wanted to learn from him. That's called sichas chaverim, even if in some context it's a rebbe who's being mekabel from a talmid. This is the consciousness of realizing every person has a nekudah, every person has a nekudah tova, and we all need to be mekabel from one another. So far we learned about the nekudah, that is the nekudah of the tzaddik klape Klal Yisrael. That's the hierarchy, right, of above to below. Then there's the nekudah of chaver, and as just Hashem, we're going to get to what's called nekudas atzmai, and those are the three nekudas that Torah Lamed Dalet is built upon. I think it's an excellent start. I'm looking forward to continuing tomorrow morning. Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach. Thank you so much for listening, and have the most wonderful day. Yes, sure. Thank you so much.
ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי, האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני